Hello again. This time we're going to be talking about audio clips and specifically the ability that Ableton Live has to warp audio in real time. Okay, so warping audio is a process whereby Ableton Live analyzes the audio that you're using within it and assigns things called pseudo warp markers to things called transients. And we can then turn those pseudo warp markers into real warp markers, and by using those warp markers we can manipulate the audio within Ableton Live to make it fit to a specific grid for means of correctively altering the timing, or we can creatively alter timing as well. So I realise that I've just ran through a very quick description without showing you any examples. But that was just to introduce the terms. I'm going to show you a few examples now and we'll talk through it as we go. Okay, so this is the Ableton Live browser over here on the left, and by clicking on one of these WAV audio files I can audition it. Okay, so there's a file. Let's choose a different one down here. Okay, I quite like the sound of that, so I'm going to drag this in and drop it into an audio clip. Into an audio clip slot. Now, we saw with MIDI tracks that we can create MIDI clips in a number of ways. One of the ways that you can populate an audio clip slot with information is by dragging it in there, as I've just done, onto the clip slot. So we double click on the clip here and we have a waveform display. So this is similar to the MIDI editor display, but it's a waveform display, so we get to see the audio information that's already within the clip. Now then, I mentioned pseudo warp markers, so if I just zoom in here, these grey arrows are what's called pseudo warp markers, and when Ableton Live analyzes the audio when you first drop it into the program, it places a pseudo warp marker at each transient in the audio, and you can probably see that these grey arrows align with particular events within the waveform, and a transient is simply a sudden change in level from quieter to louder. If I zoom in a little bit more, okay, so around about this area in the waveform it's quite quiet and then very quickly raises up, okay, to a higher level, and that's what's called an audio transient. So just zoomed out there again. Okay, so Ableton Live will place these pseudo warp markers, these grey warp markers, at transient events within the audio. Alright, okay, we can change the pseudo warp markers into a warp marker by double clicking, okay, and notice that it goes green. And once we've done that, we can drag it wherever we want, okay, and it'll snap to the grid, just the same as the MIDI notes would snap to the grid before. Alright, and if we want to change it back into a pseudo warp marker, we double click again. We can also change it into a warp marker by clicking and dragging. Alright, so let's have a little listen to what we've got so far. I'll stick the metronome on as well. So it sounds alright, but it's a little bit out of time. So what can we do to tighten this up a little bit? Well, I'm going to zoom in, and you can see here that it's placed a warp marker right at the start, but that doesn't really correspond to any audio. It's just placed it there because it's the very start of the audio clip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pseudo warp marker and turn it into a real warp marker. I'm going to delete this one by making a selection and pressing backspace, and then I'm going to drag this warp marker, which is the actual start of the audio content, and drag it to 1. Alright, so that corresponds with the number 1, very start of the first bar. Okay, let's see if this has made a bit of a difference. Well, it's a little bit better, but there's a few more things we can do to tighten it up. For example, we can change these more prominent transients into proper warp markers and drag them more neatly onto the grid. Okay, so let's see how this sounds. So that sounds a little bit better to me, and let's just prove it by making a selection and deleting all of the warp markers and having a listen. Okay, and then I'll undo what I've just done, and that should put the warp markers back in. Okay, that sounds a little bit better to me. And what we haven't really covered so far is the fact that down here in this sample options box, we can turn warping on and off. So sometimes you might drag a clip in and it might not automatically be warped, so you can switch that warping on and off in here. Notice that the warp markers are retained when we switch warping back on. Okay, and you can also turn loop on and off. So if I have loop off at the minute and play the clip, it just plays once. Okay, so we do have to have this loop button lit up if we want the clip to loop around and round. Okay, and that was a relatively well cut loop, what we call a well cut loop when we dragged it into Ableton Live. Let's just have a look at something that's not so well cut. So you should be able to hear that that isn't looping particularly well. Let's just drag this into one of these clip slots and have a look at it. A bit of a closer look. Okay, so it's not looping particularly well. So the idea here really is it's a counting exercise, okay? So the idea is to try and, I'm going to switch the metronome off just for now while I try and figure out where exactly this loop should end and begin to loop back round from 1 again. Okay, I'm going to try it here. I'm going to try and drag this to the 3 and just make a half bar loop. No, that sounds pretty bad, so let's give that another go. I'll just get rid of this warp marker. What about this one? Let's see if we can drag this out to, I'll tell you what, I'll get rid of this warp marker by double clicking. I'll drag this out to the 2. Maybe not, maybe it's this one here. That's a little bit better. And the same way that I did before, I'm just going to take these pseudo warp markers and drag them onto the closest major grid point up here where these numbers are. Okay, so that's an example of how you can take something that isn't cut so well and bring it in, and all I really did there is played it a few times, counted in my head through the 1, 2, 3, 4s, and had a couple of goes visually trying to see where would be the best place for it to start looping again. And as you can see there, I had to do a few different versions of it, so you will have to experiment with some loops that you drag in. You're not going to get everyone first time, but do bring some not so well cut loops into Ableton Live and experiment with them in that way. For those of you interested in bringing longer samples into Ableton Live, whether that's for DJing or for any other means, there is an auto warp algorithm that Ableton Live can use to try and save you a little bit of time. So let me just try and demonstrate that. I'm going to look over here for something a little bit longer. Let's find something that's going to have a fairly simple beat to it. Where are we? Electronic would probably be good. Maybe something by Daft Punk. Alright, let's try this. So, this is the track One More Time by Daft Punk. Now, the first thing we need to do before I drag it in is I'm going to press Command, comma, and go over to the Preferences and go to the Record, Warp, and Launch tab. And here we have the option that says Auto Warp Long Samples. Now I've got that switched off at the minute. You might want to have this switched on as time goes on to let Ableton have a go at auto warping as you drag long samples in, but I've got mine switched off for now. So I'm going to drag this into this clip slot. You can see it loading in there, and unlike the loops that we dragged in before, it's not warping it. Okay, so we're going to have to ask it to warp before it does any analysis in terms of warping the audio. All right, so that's the first thing I'm going to do, is switch that on. Okay, now you can see, if I zoom in, that just with the shorter loops, it's added a warp marker at the beginning. Hasn't added one at the end, but it's added one right at the beginning. And again, we've got all of these pseudo warp markers, okay, where the transients are. Now then, there's a few options for the way that you decide to warp a long sample. Okay, one of the things you can do is, if you'd like to base the session tempo around a track, say for example you're putting a DJ set together or something like that, and you want the overall session to be in time with the first song that you bring into the session, which is quite a common thing, you can switch the metronome off. Okay, we can take warping off for now, and I'm going to play the sample, and as I play the sample I'm going to use this tap tempo to tap along with the track. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to set the Ableton Live session tempo to be very, very similar to the tempo of the track. Let's give it a go. So it looks to me like it's around about 1, 2, 3. It was dipping just below and just above 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to highlight the tempo, hit 1, 2, 3, and enter. And we've now set the session tempo to be 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be pretty close to what this One More Time track is. All right. Then I'm going to switch warping back on. Next, I'm going to do a similar thing to what I did with the loop before. I'm going to make this the first warp marker in the clip. I'm going to get rid of this one, okay, and I'm going to right click, or if you're on a Mac, control click on this first warp marker, and let's see the options that we get. There's plenty of options, but there's only a few that I'm interested in. This one, for starters, set 1.1.1 here, so that'll be the very, very start of the clip in terms of time. Hit that, and there you can see that the start marker moves, and above this first warp marker is the number 1. Okay, so I'll just zoom out again. This is the loop brace, so I'm not too worried about that, because I'm not gonna play this track as a loop within my set. It's just going to be one song that I'm going to bring in from the start to the end. If we right click again, there's a few more things. Okay, we've got these various warp from options here. Okay, if you've got a track like this Daft Punk track that's an electronic track that you know is going to have a consistent BPM, i.e. consistent tempo, like the vast majority of electronic tracks that you will bring into your session, you can choose warp from here straight, and that tells Ableton Live that the audio file you've brought in is a consistent tempo all the way through, and you'll find that with the vast majority of DJ type tracks that you bring in. So there we go. What does it do? Well, we still only got one warp marker, but you probably saw that these pseudo transient markers shifted a little bit. Okay, so Ableton Live has had its best guess, or its best go at warping this entire track. Okay, we've told it that it only has 1 BPM rate for its entire duration. If we stick the metronome back on and hit play, sounds pretty good for starters. Okay, now remember that you can still go in like we did with the loop before, and you can tighten all of these things up if you want. You can turn these pseudo warp markers into proper warp markers and fix them to the grid a little bit more stringently if you want to. All right, but that should give you a good starting place to start dropping loops and longer samples into your Ableton Live sessions and to experiment with warping. Enjoy.